After Star Wars was released, it became apparent that my story, however many films it took to tell, was only one of thousands that could be told about the characters who inhabited its galaxy. But these were not the stories that I was destined to tell. Instead, they would spring from the imagination of other writers, inspired by the glimpse of a galaxy that Star Wars provided. Today, it is an amazing, if unexpected, legacy of Star Wars that so many gifted writers are contributing new stories to that saga. George Lucas, from the introduction of A Splinters of the Mind's Eye, 1996.
Hello there, and welcome back to the Skywalker Files from a certain point of view. I'm your host, Rockwell, guiding you calmly, deliberately, and with only a touch of dry exasperation through the storied and occasionally chaotic landscape of Star Wars Expanded Universe. Today's journey takes us into the early days of Anakin Skywalker's Jedi training. Yes, young Skywalker is about 12 years old here, which means he's old enough to wield a lightsaber and save lives, but still young enough to have absolutely no idea how to follow simple instructions. Wonderful timing for a galactic sporting event. We're exploring the Dangerous Games, Book 3 in Jude Watson's Jedi Quest series. In this installment, Anakin and Obi-Wan's travel takes them to Euceron to attend the Galactic Games, essentially the Star Wars version of the Olympics, but with more aliens, more political intrigue, and significantly higher risks of explosions. Despite the festive atmosphere, things aren't quite right. There's corruption beneath the surface, sabotage lurking in the shadows, and the lingering sense that the galaxy's celebration of unity might be hiding something far less harmonious. As usual, Anakin finds himself pulled between his desire to help, his impatience with authority, and that small but persistent voice telling him he's special enough to bend the rules. Obi-Wan, meanwhile, is doing his best to keep the boy alive, keep the mission on track, and visibly trying not to sigh every 10 minutes. In this episode, we'll dig into how the Dangerous Games explores the tension between competition, incorporation, fame, and responsibility, and how Anakin's time at the games reveals fault lines that will follow him for the rest of his life. So grab your tickets, find your seats, and please remain calm, no matter how many suspicious individuals appear backstage. With Anakin present, something is bound to catch fire.
As we continue our steady march through the galaxy of the expanded universe, it's important, as always, to ground ourselves in when this particular story appeared and where it sits in the broader timeline. The Dangerous Game occupies a very interesting little pocket in both. The Dangerous Games is published in 2002 by Scholastic as part of the Jedi Quest series. This was the era when the prequels were rolling out, the expanding universe was expanding with a refreshed sense of direction, and Anakin Skywalker, a character barely explored outside of film, was finally receiving narrative space to grow, struggle, and occasionally sulk. This is book 3 in the 10-book series, early enough that Anakin is still finding his footing as a Padawan, both literally and metaphorically. It's also early enough in the line that Jude Watson was still laying emotional groundwork, the complex mentor-student dynamic, Anakin's need for approval versus Obi-Wan's struggle to understand a boy who sometimes seems brilliant and sometimes seems primed for disaster. This book shows us Anakin's competitive streak and how quickly righteous determination can drift toward impulsive danger. It also shows us Obi-Wan taking his first cautious steps into the mentor who doesn't know how to prevent disaster but will try anyway era. Both arcs will echo through the rest of the series and ultimately into the films. Jude Watson, who wrote extensively within the prequel era EU, is arguably the single most influential author in shaping the emotional lives of both Obi-Wan and Anakin outside the films. Through Jedi Apprentice, Jedi Quest, and The Last of the Jedi, Watson built a consistent through line about how Jedi grow, how they fracture, and how the small, emotional missteps can ripple into larger storms. Before diving into the twists and turns of the dangerous games, it's worth pausing to introduce the key figures who make the story hum with tension, ambition, and the occasional burst of poorly contained teenage emotion. This may be a book about a grand sporting festival, but its character dynamics are what give it its weight. First, we have Anakin Skywalker. At around 12 years old, Anakin is still early in his Jedi training, but that does not stop him from displaying momentary brilliance, impressive bravery, and some deep-seated emotional turbulence. He also has a talent for fighting danger, even when danger has not technically been advertised. The Galactic Games and the celebrity competition and corruption swirling around them give Anakin a stage perfectly suited to his strengths and weaknesses. He is drawn into the excitement of the speed and to the aura of the games themselves, but most importantly, this environment pokes at his insecurities, his needs to prove himself, his desire to belong, and his struggle to understand the Jedi expectation of emotional detachment. Throughout the novel, we watch him wrestle with jealousy, loyalty, impatience, and the desire to do the right thing, even when the right thing seems to be wearing a sign that says, "Ignore the Jedi rules." And then there's Obi-Wan Kenobi. As Anakin's still new master, Obi-Wan finds himself playing multiple roles at once. Jedi investigator, diplomat, babysitter, damage anticipator, and the galaxy's most exhausted chaperone. Obi-Wan spends much of the story observing how Anakin reacts to temptation, competition, and manipulation, all while trying his best to nudge the boy back toward calm, rational thought. It rarely works. This book highlights one of the central tensions in their relationship. Obi-Wan wants to guide Anakin carefully and compassionately, but he lacks the emotional vocabulary to fulfill that fully and understand the boy's internal struggles. Anakin, who senses the world in far sharper colors than his peers, often feels misunderstood because of this. The Galactic Games throw them both into a pressure cooker, and Obi-Wan's steady, patient demeanor is continuously tested by a combination of sabotage, political deception, and Anakin's boundless energy. The emotional core of the Dangerous Games isn't just the spectacle of the Galactic Games themselves, it's the desperate, high-stakes mission undertaken by Ronan and Dylan Tyrell, two brothers driven by fear, love, and a steadily growing sense of hopelessness. Their purpose at the games is not glory, it's not competition, it's not even fame, it's rescue. Ronan and Dylan's sister, Aretha, has been taken as a slave by none other than Sebulba, the notoriously cruel Doug podracer, and Anakin Skywalker's old rival from Tatooine. Sebulba has never been particularly subtle in his villainy, and the Tyrell brothers find themselves entangled in his cruelty. Their desperation leads them to make a dangerous choice. Choices involving deception, alliances with criminals, and entanglements far beyond their ability to control. Ronan, the older and more composed brother, feels the weight of responsibility. He believes he must be the one to fix everything, even if it means compromising his integrity or risking his life. Deland, the younger brother, is emotional and impulsive. He struggles with the injustice of it all. He grows frustrated, furious even, at the Jedi, the game officials, the galaxy at large, and sometimes even Ronan. Deland's vulnerability is raw, open, and painfully recognizable to Anakin. The Tyrell brothers' desperation becomes the beating heart of the story. Their pain mirrors Anakin's own memories of slavery, his complicated feelings towards Tatooine, and his unresolved resentment toward the Jedi's non-interference. For Anakin, Ronan and Deland are more than side characters. They are a warning, a reflection, and a catalyst. The struggle forces him to relive what he left behind and reveals how easily love can turn him into somebody that's desperate. The Galactic Games were supposed to be a spectacle, a shining moment for the Republic. Athletes from across the galaxy, banners waving, crowds cheering, judges watching carefully. The sort of event designed to make everyone forget the politics were dangerous and exhausting business. Of course, the galaxy rarely cooperates with such noble intentions. As Anakin Skywalker and Obi-Wan Kenobi arrive with the Jedi security team, it quickly becomes clear that this will not be a simple ceremonial assignment. Obi-Wan moves through the stadiums and arenas with his usual calm, measured steps, scanning for trouble, taking notes, quietly calculating. Anakin, on the other hand, is drawn to every new sight and sound, every race, every hoverboard, and every cheering crowd. He is, in short, exactly the wrong age for such a delicate mission. Trouble, it seems, has no respect for ages. It doesn't take long for the Jedi to uncover the first layer of it. The Commerce Guild, a powerful organization with interests in spanning trade, gambling, and influence over countless sectors of the Republic, has quietly hatched a scheme. Their plan is elegant in its cruelty: create chaos at the games, manipulate illegal gambling, and frame certain senators in the process. If it succeeds, they will discredit political opponents, gain leverage, and walk away looking respectable. It is the kind of plan that makes Obi-Wan's jaw tighten in silent disapproval and Anakin's curiosity flare to dangerous brilliance. And yet, as the Jedi above ground work to untangle the scheme, Anakin finds his attention drawn elsewhere. There are whispers, soft, almost secretive, that somewhere in the caves beneath the planet, an outlawed pod racing competition is taking place. The idea of illegal pod racing might have made any adult weary, but Anakin, it lights a fire in him. Memories of Tatooine, of the thrill and terror of racing across the sands, rise like smoke he thought long extinguished. And then he learns the final impossible detail. Hekula, the son of Sebulba, is piloting the very pod racer Anakin once owned. The young Jedi cannot ignore it. He cannot. The past, it seems, has come for him, loud, fast, and dangerous. It is there in the shadowed tunnels that Anakin meets the Tyrell brothers, Ronan and Deland. They are not here for sport, not for glory, not for competition. They are here for survival, for family. Their sister, Aretha, has been enslaved by Sebulba, caught in the cruel legacy of pod racing family whose brutality seems to pass down like an heirloom. The Tyrells are desperate, calculating their every move, and yet hopelessly without help. Anakin sees the mirror of his own past. He sees Tatooine, the slavery, the helplessness, and he cannot walk away. "I'll do it," he says, of course, before Obi-Wan can sigh in exasperation. He will race in the Outlaws event. He will enter the caves, pilot the podracer he knows better than anyone alive, and he will save Aretha for the Tyrell brothers. He will do it because it's the right thing, because the Force whispers it, and perhaps because, like so many 12-year-olds before and after him, he cannot resist proving just how capable he is. The Jedi security team above ground continuing to untangle the Commerce Guild's plot, exposing the corruption behind the games, protecting senators from false accusations, and preventing the spectacle from collapsing in chaos. Meanwhile, below ground, Anakin faces Hekula in the illegal pod race, dodging rock formations, caverns, and the Dug's aggression. Speed, memory, and instinct, all of it comes into play. The stakes are heartbreakingly real. One misstep could mean failure, injury, or worse. But with each lap, each turn, each desperate maneuver, Anakin begins to confront more than just Hekula. He confronts the ghosts of his own past. By the race's end, victory is achieved, Aretha is freed, Hekula is bested, and yet the triumph is not simple. Anakin's compassion, his heroism, his refusal to ignore the suffering of others, these are all deeply admirable traits, but they are also dangerous for the boy. Is learning that moral action is rarely neat, rarely consequence-free, and often intertwined with fear, anger, and responsibility beyond his years. Above, the Commerce Guild is exposed. Justice is done, at least for now. But the games themselves, supposedly a symbol of unity, have revealed something far darker. The fragility of the Order, the persistence of corruption, and the immense challenge the Jedi face in protecting not only the galaxy, but the innocence of its young heroes. The Dangerous Games is, at its heart, a story about responsibility, courage, and the cost of compassion. It reminds us that even in moments of celebration, danger can hide in the shadows, that the past never fully leaves us, and that heroism is as much about moral courage as physical skill. And perhaps most importantly, it reminds us that young Anakin Skywalker, talented, impulsive, and fiercely competitive, is only beginning the journey that will define him for a decade to come. One of the pleasures and sometimes frustrations of reading The Dangerous Games is noticing how tightly Jude Watson weaves his story into the larger fabric of the prequel era. On its surface, it is a tale of adventure, heroism, and high-speed pod racing, but beneath its surface, the novel ripples outward, connecting to characters, events, and themes that will shape the galaxy, and more specifically, Anakin Skywalker, for years to come. The race against Hekula is more than just a plot device. It forces Anakin and the reader to confront the boy's formative experience on Tatooine. Sebulba, the Dug responsible for his childhood humiliation and danger, appears indirectly through his son. Anakin's ability to face Hekula is not simply a matter of skill. It is a confrontation with trauma, the unresolved anger and fear that simmer beneath his youthful confidence. This theme of returning to past horrors recurs throughout the Jedi Quest series, subtly preparing readers for the future. The seeds of obsession, anger, and moral compromise that will later complicate Anakin's journey into the Jedi Order and eventually his path towards the dark side. The Tyrell's mission to rescue their sister highlights a recurring motif in Wattson's work: the intersection of personal loyalty and galactic politics. Here the stakes are intimate, a single family, one enslaved sister, but the story is layered atop the public spectacle of the games and the Commerce Guild's criminal plot. Through the Tyrells, readers see Anakin's empathy in action, but also the dangerous side of impulsive heroism. This narrative thread foreshadows Anakin's tendency in later EU works to act according to his personal moral compass rather than Jedi protocol. A tendency that, as many fans of the saga know, will grow increasingly consequential. The subplot involving the Commerce Guild's attempt to discredit senators is a subtle yet effective reminder that politics in the Republic is never clean. While the Jedi are obstinately neutral observers and peacekeepers, Watson shows us that corruption and manipulation can flourish even under the supposedly watchful eye of the Order. The narrative echoes later EU stories, particularly those dealing with the rise of the Trade Federation, the complexities of the Senate's politics, and the Republic's vulnerabilities that will accumulate in the prequel films. In many ways, The Dangerous Games reads like a microcosm of galactic instability, greed, ambition, corruption, and juxtaposed against heroes trying their best within tight constraints. In short, The Dangerous Games is not just a story about competition and daring rescues. It is a carefully placed puzzle piece in the grand narrative of the prequel era EU. It connects personal trauma, ethical decision-making, and political intrigue, all while building the foundation for the emotional journey that will define Anakin Skywalker and the Jedi who struggles to guide him through the rest of the series. Watson accomplishes something deceptively simple but remarkably effective. She makes a story that could have been a straightforward adventure into a layered exploration of character, politics, and consequences. For fans following the EU, it is both entertaining and essential. The Dangerous Games is, at first glance, a story about competitions, races, and galactic pageantry. But as we've seen, Jude Watson's writing is never content with the surface-level thrills. Beneath the colorful banners, cheering crowds, and pod racing engines, this book quietly examines some of the core elements that define Anakin Skywalker and the galaxy around him. Anakin emerges here as a young hero in the making, impulsive, compassionate, fearless, and just enough of a rule bender to keep Obi-Wan on edge. We see him confront injustices head-on, make moral, complex choices, and take responsibility for outcomes that could very easily spiral out of control. It's a story that balances action with character development, showing readers that the heroism in the Star Wars universe is rarely clean or easy. Obi-Wan, in contrast, is the patient counterbalance. He is the voice of reason, the steady hand on the reins, and the reluctant chaperone to a boy whose empathy often surpasses his caution. In many ways, their dynamic in this story is a microcosm of the Jedi's approach to mentorship. Guide, observe, intervene minimally, and hope that chaos doesn't escalate into catastrophe. The Tyrell's brothers add a human, urgent layer to the narrative. Their desperation to save their sister from Sebulba illustrates how personal stakes can drive people to extraordinary actions. Through them, Watson not only heightens the tension, but also reinforces one of the series' recurring lessons. The galaxy may be full of rules, regulations, and protocols, but morality and courage are more exercised in moments that exist outside those rules. And of course, there's the pod races. Dangerous, illegal, and thrilling. It is a narrative device that works on multiple levels: adventure, suspense, emotional catharsis, and thematic resonance. Through the race, Anakin is forced to confront his past, navigate present danger, and take responsibility for others in a way that will echo across the rest of the series. Ultimately, The Dangerous Games is a story about risk, responsibility, and the way a young hero is tested, not just in combat, but morally and emotionally. It is also subtly a reminder that even in a galaxy filled with Jedi, political intrigue, and spectacle events, personal courage and empathy remain indispensable and sometimes terrifying qualities. In short, it is a story that is much about the choices we make in secret as the ones we make in public, and it sets the stage for the broader consequences of Anakin's decision in the Jedi Quest series. And so, we reach the end of today's journey through the dangerous games. Dazzling stadiums, shadow caves, and prayerless pod races have quieted. The Commerce Guild's schemes have been thwarted, and Eretha Tyrell has been freed thanks to Anakin's impulsive bravery and uncanny pilot skills. For a 12-year-old, it's not a bad day at all, though Obi-Wan's nerves might tell a slightly different story. As always, Jude Watson reminds us that even in moments of apparent victory, there is complexity beneath the surface. Political corruption, personal responsibility, and the lingering shadows of the past trauma are never far from view. And of course, young Anakin continues to demonstrate the two things that make him both remarkable and exhausting: compassion that drives him to heroic action, and impatience that keeps Obi-Wan perpetually exasperated. The Galactic Games may have concluded, but the lessons linger. Heroism is messy, morality is rarely simple, and the galaxy's shadows are often closer than its bright banners would have you believe. Next time on the Skywalker Files, from a certain point of view, we'll dive into Jude Watson's The Master of Disguise. This is the story where Anakin is thrust into a web of espionage, secrets, and hidden identities that will test both his courage and his ability to discern truth from deception. It's a tale of intrigue, subterfuge, and the kind of moral complexity that the Jedi, and especially Anakin, never navigate with complete grace. So join me then as we follow Anakin Skywalker into his next challenge, uncovering the layers of deceit that hide just beneath the Republic's shiny exterior, and of course marvel at how Obi-Wan manages to keep him alive in the process. Until then, may the Force be with you, and may your pod racing reflexes remain slightly less deadly than young Skywalkers.